today you're coming from the land of happy homeowner. Is that correct? Would that be a correct assumption?
Oh my gosh. Do you remember when we had Dylan McConis on the show and I was talking about how uncomfortable I am when I have workers in my house?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, I've had workers in my house now for 2 days straight, and it was like one of those homeowners' nightmares that it just... You ever have one of those dreams where, like, you've got a loose thread on your sweater, so you pull it, and it starts to unravel and unravel and unravel, and next thing you know, you're standing there naked in the middle of the classroom, and you're still pulling, and there's parts of your body missing, and have you ever had one of those nightmares that
Yes.
is just, it gets worse and worse, and you can't stop it, and there's nothing you can do to make it stop, and it's just getting worse?
So I'm guessing what happened here, because all I got from you yesterday was like, can't talk now, bit of a plumbing problem. And then I'm assuming it was this kind of conversation. Well, Mr. Geiger, we noticed something when we opened up the wall. Is it with that kind of a thing?
Oh, my God. Yeah, exactly. We had a little drip into the living room, and the bathroom is right above the living room. We had a little drip. Dave, it was a little drip. The smallest thing.
Okay.
In fact, I was debating, should I do it today or do it tomorrow? It's not a big deal.
I'm flash forwarding to this where later on as a homeowner, you're holding up your arms like Moses and just parting your living room water like the Red Sea.
Well, thank goodness we don't have any water damage to speak of. But they say, we're going to have to go into the wall to get this stack pipe taken care of.
Okay.
And I'm like, nah, that doesn't sound great. But we were going to repaint the living room anyway, and no big deal. Go into that wall, get to that stack pipe, do what you need to do. So they come over Monday morning. They go into the wall, and I'm working upstairs, trying to work, trying to stay out of their way, and trying to work. And I hear, sir, you want to come down and take a look at this?
Oh, no.
So I come down the stairs, and they show me...
You never want to hear, sir. Because when a contractor is being polite, that means that's another $500 for you.
Oh, yeah. It's something else. So he says, take a look. He goes, the situation is, without getting too detailed, the problem is the stack pipe, but there's a bigger problem in the pipe above the stack pipe, and to get to that, they're going to have to tear open the floor in the bathroom and some of the wall behind the toilet. Not what I wanted to hear, but we had been planning on doing some home renovations anyway. We were talking about doing either like a home improvement loan or redoing the financing on the mortgage, all that stuff. And Carolyn was working on that with her bank at work, and we weren't planning on doing it right now, but we were planning on doing it. So we're like, no, okay, give us an estimate for that, and we'll take a look at it, bop, and let's get that stack pipe taken care of. Okay, no problem. I go back up to work. Now they're in the basement because the stack pipe goes all the way down in the basement. 15 minutes later, I hear, sir, you're going to want to come down and take a look at this.
Oh, no.
So
sir, I'm sorry to say we figured out that your house was built in Philadelphia in 1840, and turns out there's a lot of old whale oil stuck in the pipes. We're sorry about that.
I would kill for whale oil right now. So he says the problem down at the bottom of the stack pipe, it isn't just the stack pipe. It goes lower. We're going to have to go into the floor in the basement to take care of that. And that's going to mean jackhammers, and that's going to mean your estimate's going way up. I said, okay, no problem. You got to do what you got to do. We're in this far. Got to take care of it. All right, we'll get working on it. A couple hours later, I hear, sir?
Oh, no,
and
not again.
I come to the top of the stairs. I'm on the second floor looking down on the first floor. And I stand there and I say, listen, every time you say, sir, it costs me more money. You got to stop. And he looks at me and he says, ma'am? I said, somehow I preferred sir. Okay, what's going on? He goes, you're going to want to take a look at this. I come downstairs, and the problem isn't just the pipe directly underneath the floor, but the problem goes underneath the floor and across the floor to the main sewer line. So now they've got to tear up a huge chunk of the basement. And it's like, well, when you looked at the problem, there was literally no not doing it. So it's like, all right, start working. Let me know where you end up. And that was my Monday. And then this morning they went and they finished the rest of the stack pipe. But like they don't even have the section of ceiling put back in because we've still got, you remember that drip I was telling you about?
Sure.
We've still got the drip. I'm about $3,000 lighter and we still got the drip because the drip was completely in a different place. And I mean, there was a problem with the stack pipe. I could see that. But we still have the drip. So now they've got to come back and we're going to have a major bathroom renovation. And the good news is my wife is already picking out tile and deciding whether she wants heated floors in there.
Sure.
But the bad news is once they start, I know I'm going to hear at least once or twice, sir.
Sir, can you come in here? Turns out we found a revolutionary musket stuck in your stack pipe.
That was my last thought before going to bed the night before, Sunday night. I sat there thinking, did you remember that story about the guy in Cleveland that opened up his walls to do some home renovation and he found a copy of Action Comics #1 inside of his wall?
What?
Remember that story?
I never heard that. No. Wow.
He had to do some serious renovation on his house, and he was doing it himself because he couldn't afford to have it done. He pulls this wall down, and he finds a copy of Action Comics #1.
What?
And of course, now it was, I mean, in any condition, Action Comics #1 goes for millions and millions of dollars. I forget how many millions of dollars that he auctioned it for, or they said it was worth. 3 weeks later, there was a follow-up to the story. Do you know he continued his renovation and found a second copy?
No, he did not.
He found two copies of Action Comics #1 inside of his walls. And of course, my next thought was, if you own that house, would there ever be another wall left standing? I would dismantle the house.
No, you immediately listen. To re-drywall a house is $10,000-$20,000. So you start tearing every wall out of that house at that point.
There would not be another wall left standing. You'd have to dismantle it piece by piece like a Lego.
And you don't go in with the giant, rubber mallets and claw hammers that you would normally take drywall off. It's like, all right, everybody, tiny pinball hammers. We're all going in, tink, 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 tink.
All of a sudden, this turns into an archaeological dig.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
copies.
in there with little hammers and brushes.
That just paid for his kid's college. Good Lord.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, in Philadelphia, not that this needs to become a plumbing show, but I'm assuming based on when Philadelphia had its big build out, your houses, I'm sure, were well before copper. But what type of metal was it that your stack pipe actually was?
Oh, God, that stack pipe, I'm going to call it cast iron because it was thick black metal.
Yep. So here's the joy of owning old cast iron for stack pipes is that I bet the actual drainage hole on a 4-inch pipe was probably like ½ inch, right?
Yep.
It had probably filled up over the last 100 years. And because the thing about cast iron is like a little thing sticks to it and then something else sticks to the little thing. And then 100 years later, all of a sudden you have a 4-inch pipe that now has a ½ inch drainage.
Yeah. And this guy was like, whoever the carpenter was who made the hole for this drain pipe must have been his first day on the job because it's nowhere near big enough. We're going to have to open up that hole. And I'm like, just do whatever you got to do. Honest to God, I don't know what any of this stuff means.
You know what's funny about that though? Now, it's so funny the march of technology. How and this is appropriate to webcomics, not at all, but it's fun to talk about. How cast iron, like those original stack pipes, probably weighed a ½ ton when they were putting that one in. If it's 2 or 3 story, but now it's that industrial grade PVC, and the whole thing weighs like 5 pounds.
Yep.
And it's probably going to last twice as long as that cast iron did, which is amazing.
I hope it does. I'm old fashioned. I look at that and I'm like, I want metal. I want something solid. But of course, metal corrodes. That's half the reason I've got all the problems I got.
Brad, you're going to have the most. Metal. Once you get that PVC in there, you're going to have the most slippery flushes you've ever had. It's going to be fantastic.
I'm looking forward to flushing again without holding my breath.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about slippery flushes
And slippery showers. Oh, that didn't work at all. I wasn't thinking. And I'm Brad Guigar, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is being brought to you by our supporters at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We've got a bunch of stuff immediately ready to go. So I'm going to jump right in with our first question for you, Brad. You ready for this one?
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Alan writes in via patreon.com/comiclab. He says, "Hello, Brad and Dave. I have a very small, basically non-existent following on social media. I've heard that a very small percentage of followers will ever take the time to share, retweet, etc. items, even if they like them. I did some very quick research, and it looks like the average engagement rate on Twitter, that's just actions, not specifically retweeting, is less than 1%. If my following is minuscule and those few followers aren't going to share the content they enjoy, how do I go about getting my content out to a wider audience? I understand the first goal is making good content, but it feels like the numbers are stacked against anyone who doesn't know of a way to get their foot in the door." Brad, how does Alan go about making that Twitter audience, as he described it, I believe it was minuscule, a small, basically non-existent following on social media? How does he grow that, make that work for him when the engagement rate, as he said, is probably less than 1%?
Well, number one, that quote unquote research about the engagement rate being less than 1%, I don't buy that because 9 chances out of 10, that's lumping in a whole bunch of different Twitter users, right? And some of them are going to be really bad users, and some of them are going to be really savvy users. And it's going to take the grand total of all of that and say maybe 1%. I don't buy that. And the other part that I'm having trouble with is I know the answer is posting good content, but I want to hear a different answer. And the answer, I'm really sorry that you know what the answer is, but you want to hear a different answer.
Brad, I know the answer to having a happy relationship is to being kind and loving to one another, but I want to know if you know of any shortcuts to a happy relationship.
Yeah, is there a way that I can do that and involve hookers? No.
Wow, I didn't expect you to take that turn, but yes, that's funny.
So here's the deal. So I want to make a point, and I'm not doing this to put anybody down, but I want to make an example. Okay, and so I looked at Alan's Twitter. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to say is there's 2 shows you absolutely have to listen to in the Comic Lab library. All right. The first one is episode number 12, where we talked about in great deal what I call the 3 C's of social media: content, commercial, and curation. And that's kind of a guide of what to post, what sort of things you can post, and how to think about what you're posting when you're posting on social media. Okay? So Go back and listen to Comic Lab 12, and then listen to episode 53, when we had Kevin McShane on, and we spent almost the entire show talking about this thing called a share statement. In other words, to put a little button on it, every time you post something, your share statement in the back of your mind is the statement that says, this is why people are going to share this post, right? And we talked about all the different share statements that there are. But before you post anything, you think to yourself, why is somebody going to post this? And if you don't have a share statement, then you reframe the post and you rewrite the post and you rethink the post until you can post it with an adequate share statement. That was the whole point of episode 53.
Right.
So we go through here, and again, I am not doing this to put you down, Alan, but I want to show you something in case you're missing it. Your pinned tweet is a link to someplace else. That's problem number 1. We've talked about in this show. You can't get people to leave the platform they're on. If I'm on Twitter, I want to stay on Twitter. I don't want to go to YouTube. I don't want to go to Facebook. I want to be on Twitter. And most of your readers, most of your followers are like that. The platforms put tons of time and effort into making their platform sticky. They want to keep people there, and they're very good at it. They're successful at it. You can't fight them. So putting a link to someplace else on your Twitter feed is a really bad strategy. You'll see us do it from time to time as part of a much bigger strategy. You'll see me post and remind my backers that they can get a phone-friendly format over on Webtoons. That's a part of a much bigger volume of posts, right? But I don't expect engagement out of that post. That's a post that's kind of a marking time post. That's there just to remind people. I don't expect engagement out of that. There's a whole lot of other things I post that I do expect and get engagement out of. All right.
Right.
So the post, the pinned tweet being a link to someplace else, not a great idea. Next, we've got a video of characters doing something. There's always a problem with video on Twitter because most of the people reading Twitter have the sound turned off because they're supposed to be doing something else at the time. And if you've got audio that is intrinsic to understanding the video, unless that has subtitles, you're kind of fighting a losing game. So you've got a video there that's posted, but it doesn't have a lot of context. Then you've got a link to a YouTube video that's the same as the previous video. Then you've got a comment about D&D. That's good. That's content. That's something I can engage with. Then you've got a character design post, like an image, not much content there. You've got a video in the next tweet. Then you've got a link to Webtoons. Then the next tweet is a link to Webtoons. Then the next tweet is a link to Webtoons. For two or three different properties that you do. And again, you're trying to get people to go off site and you're going to have little luck doing that. Then you post a comic. That's great. That's content. That's something I can engage with. Then we've got another random character design, a comic, which is good, more random character designs, a question to your readers, what do you want me to work on, a birthday card for your daughter, 3 more character designs, and now we're back all the way back to March.
Okay.
You've made 18 posts over 3 months, which isn't very good volume. And most of what you posted is stuff that I really can't engage with. It's got no share statement behind it. It's,
okay.
It's
now I see where you're going.
It's a character design. And again, if it was like you're drawing a Batman, and I'm not saying that fan art is the way to go, but for example, if you did a post, you did, here's how I draw Batman, I can engage with that if I'm a Batman fan, right? But if you're doing an original character and I don't know who that character is, and it's just an image of that character standing there doing nothing, there's not much that I can engage with there.
Right.
I don't know who it is. I don't care. And there's no context to give me a reason to care.
Right.
The reason that you're not getting engagement on Twitter isn't because of some 1% engagement statistic that you read someplace. Because I guarantee you, people who are posting good tweets with share statements behind them, who are following the 3 C's, they're getting much better than a 1% Twitter engagement. Why? Because they're posting good content. So the answer to your question is, I know it's about posting good content, but what's the other answer? There is no other answer. If you post good content, you're going to get a better than 1% Twitter engagement because you're doing it right. You can't put this knee-jerk stuff up there that has no content, no meaning, no nothing, and expect magically for people to engage in it. You don't engage in that kind of stuff. I guarantee you don't.
Right.
Why would you expect other people to? That's really what this comes down to. And I've been talking for way too long. So tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Well, okay. So I've got, first of all, I think that was helpful to go through that because 18 posts over 3 months is very minuscule. Like that's asking a lot of those 18 posts, as you've helpfully pointed out, 4 of which were actual content kind of a thing. So that's great. Right. But I want to come at this from a completely different angle. And it's one of patience. It's one involving the Beatles, and it's one involving Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours idea, right? Okay.
All right.
So here's where I'm coming at from this. Right now, you have a very small lever, and you're trying to move a big boulder, right? Like your lever's not very big because you've got 100 followers, 200 followers, I don't even know, 500 followers, doesn't matter. So right now, what you are is you're John and Paul in Liverpool playing in Paul's living room, And your reach is your mom and the one friend that came over, right? That's your reach.
Yep.
So you're thinking that you should have John and Paul by the time they're at Sergeant Pepper's, where they can say, hey, we're bigger than Jesus or whatever it was. And the entire world reacts, right? So that's what your mental game is right now. But the fact is that you are still where John and Paul are starting in Liverpool, right? You haven't yet built the audience yet, so you can't, your lever is very small. You can't move that big boulder. So just like Malcolm Gladwell says that 10,000 hours is what it takes to master anything, right? That's 20 hours a week over 10 years, roughly, or 40 hours a week over 5 years. But you get the idea. Whatever it is, 10,000 hours. And even there, it's a rough idea to get you to thinking about it in different terms, right? So just like your cartooning is going to take you 10,000 hours, building up an audience and an interaction that gives you a bigger lever to move progressively bigger and bigger boulders, that also takes 10,000 hours. So you're thinking like, why don't I have 100 followers? I posted a comic 4 weeks ago. This is ridiculous. Well, here's part of the answer. Part of it is patience. Part of it is that you're building one follower into two followers into three followers into six followers into 20, that kind of thing. And it is a very slow exponential curve that will eventually start to curve up exponentially on a big burst. But when your reach is only so big, you can only grow so fast. And it's like, Brad, I always use this metaphor too. Have you ever seen the gear systems that they use to start a locomotive?
Yes.
Where because it's moving, I don't know, 100,000 tons, whatever it is for a long train. The first gear is literally like, it's almost like a free floating spinning wheel. Like it barely has any traction on it. And then once that one gets the wheels going just a tiny bit, then the second gear engages. And then maybe you push it a tiny, you're now moved 6 inches and the third gear kicks in. You know what I mean? Like there's 1,000 gears on a locomotive to get that SOB moving because it weighs a ton. And so that's kind of like where your career is right now. It's going to feel frustrating at first, but frankly, anything worth doing is frustrating at first because you want to be John and Paul up on stage outside Heathrow or something. But right now you're John and Paul in their living room, and maybe you're going to get a gig at a local YMCA or something.
Right.
So boy, that metaphor fell apart. But anyway, you get what I'm getting at though, Brad, is that you have a very small lever to work with at first, but you have to keep working at it. So from Brad's point, you have to use it smartly. You have to constantly have the links and the content that you want and the proper things being pinned, and you want to have the right attitude on Twitter, and you want to have the right share statements like Kevin McShane said on that episode 53 that Brad mentioned. You want to have all that, but then you also want to have a mindset that says it's going to take me 10,000 hours or roughly 5 to 10 years to start seeing real traction with this, right?
Right.
Brad, what do you think about that? Now, I've spoken too long. We haven't chimed in on each other. Go ahead.
I think if Paul back in that living room would have said, hey, how do I play a G sharp? And somebody told him, oh, you put this finger here and that finger there and that finger there and that finger there. And then he would have said, well, I know that's how you do it, but how do you play a G sharp? Then he would have gotten no place. Sometimes the answers are what the answers are. And even though they're not pleasant answers, for all I know, and there might be an alternate fingering for G sharp. It's not about guitar playing. Just follow the metaphor. If you keep trying to find technicalities, you're not going to succeed on a technicality. The answer to the social media problem has always been the same. You got to post engaging content to get people to engage. You've got to go consistently. You've got to, like we said, follow the 3 C's, all of this stuff. Social media is not magic. You can't post crap on social media and expect great things to happen. It's like anything else. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And you can't keep listening to what we say. And I went back and looked, Dave, if you're a Comic Lab backer, you've got access to 26 episodes between this show and ProTips. 26 shows in which we talked about social media for so long that we tagged it social media, right? And we only get 5 tags for every Patreon post. So we don't waste a tag unless we spend a generous amount of time on that topic.
Right.
There's 26 shows and counting, because this one I'm sure is going to be 27. 26 shows and counting that we've talked specifically about social media. the stuff that we're saying in those 26 episodes applies directly to you.
Yep.
You need to go back and listen to them. The answers don't change.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be the same. And by the way, I can save you some time. We're going to say 3 C's. We're going to say share statements. We're going to say consistency. We're going to say post good stuff.
And quality.
You know, from time to time, we're going to go in and say, oh, we found out a little bit more. There's something specific about hashtags for Instagram that you could use. Stuff like that. Tweaking kind of stuff. But the basics to social media are going to be what they've been for 26 episodes and counting. Do good stuff.
Yep.
Post good stuff. Post stuff that people want to engage with. And guess what? They're going to engage with.
Yep. And I will say 2 final things before we close this out, Brad, because I think everybody loves it when mommy and daddy fight. So the one thing that I will disagree with on Brad is that I think actually that 1% number feels about right to me, and I have no data in front of me to look at, but I'm just saying it feels about right. Like, and even if it's not right, here's the takeaway. The takeaway is it's very hard to get people to take any action on anything because they're constantly scrolling, right? They're moving fast on social media. So the takeaway there is not that, no, it's very hard to do. The takeaway is, I got to get that number bigger so that in order to get 100 people to take action, I've got to have 10,000 people doing something, or, that kind of thing. So that's the goal. So that's the way to frame that in your mind, is not that like it's impossible, like it's only 1%. No, the trick is then to get the overall gross number so that your net is higher. Okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
The second one is, and this is the last thought, not every comic works on every social media platform.
Yeah, that's true.
That's another thing I want to talk about. I have Drive, which makes probably 3 times, maybe 4 times as much money as Sheldon does for me annually, right? How often do you see me tweet about that on Twitter? Very rarely, because for the most part, Sheldon is what gets passed around. People don't tweet an individual page of a long-form story or retweet it. I might get a few likes. That's not a big deal. For me, the better engagement is the incredibly welcoming and fun message boards on Patreon, which people dive in all the time. The feedback is also in the patronage itself, which is great. And yet, so what I'm getting at is Sheldon works good on Twitter. Sheldon works amazing on Instagram. Drive wouldn't do jack spit on Instagram and barely works on Instagram, right? Or on Twitter. So my takeaway here is that if Twitter is not working for you, try Reddit. If Reddit's not working for you, try Instagram. If Instagram's not working for you, try Imgur. What I'm getting at is, if don't become a squeaky wheel of this. I've been doing it for 7 years and it's not working. Well, it's also good to try it up in different venues and locales, maybe at the same time, as a way of seeing which one clicks. Brad, thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it looks like he's doing a lot of video, and it's a good time to remind you that YouTube is a social media network in and of itself. And if you're doing video, you need to be doing everything you can in that platform to make sure that you're being shared and spread around there. That's a huge platform for you to play in. I see a lot of effort trying to get Twitter people over to YouTube. And I don't know any way of checking on this, but I'm hoping that you're doing the same, trying to get YouTube people over to your YouTube page, or your YouTube channel. So yeah, there's a lot to do there, but again, it always comes down to post good stuff, post stuff that people want to engage with.
But Alan, I think between the 4 or 5 different approach answers that we've given you here, I hope one of them clicks with you there. Best of luck with it. But now, Brad, we are now at the halfway point of the show, and we've only answered 2 questions: how clogged were Brad's pipes, and Alan's question. So it's time to move on to question number 2. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Oh, when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, no worries.
You can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Leave us a 5-star and a few kind words.
That, and along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, let's talk comics.
So, Dave, we've got a question from our longtime Patreon backer, Cameron, over there in Australia. And Cameron says, yeah. And here's how you can tell. He's not just pretending with like a face post office box or something. Wait,
what was that phrase? Face post office box? Did you have a mini stroke? What just happened right there?
I did. A fake post office box.
That was amazing. That came out as face office boxes backs. That was great. I very much enjoyed that.
I did kind of feel like my lips weren't working there for a minute.
That is all right. I mean, basically, you're breathing in pure sewer gas at home right now, so I get it.
The bad thing is it's starting to smell good.
That's when you know the body has adjusted.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Let's jump into Cameron's question.
So here's how you can tell Cameron's from Australia. Listen to this. He says this. G'day. That's all I got there.
All right, Brad.
He said g'day.
What?
My question is... My question is about comic making workshops. I've been teaching them to younger kids for a while at local schools and community groups, and I've been asked to teach one aimed at 17 to 13-year-olds in a few months. I'm confident in teaching an older audience, but I want to make sure I'm giving them information they want. I'm wondering if either of you have advice on teaching workshops for teenagers, and do you have any experience reaching out to schools and community groups to arrange such things in the future? So part of it is, what should he be teaching these kids? And part of it is, do we have any tips on reaching out to community groups to do this some more in the future?
Wow. Okay. Well, so the one thing I will say, Cameron, is that if you've gone, both Brad and I have taught both for younger kids, elementary school and high school, college level. And at the high school level, that 13 to 17 range, what I want you to prepare for is 1,000% more surliness as you look out on those faces. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So all the joie de vivre and naive sweetness that you found with little kids when you were teaching them cartooning.
Yeah.
What you're going to get now is somebody flicking a spit wad at you, and another kid's going to be vaping in the back. Listen to me. No, 13 to 7-year-olds are tricky because they still have the curiosity and the joy, but there's the social pressure to hide it. You know what I mean? So you're going to have a quieter class, and you're frankly going to get less overt signals that you're doing the right thing. So I find it a little bit trickier to teach teens. But the truth is that that is an age that very much is interested in self-expression and trying to figure out both storytelling and sharing their own story. And so you're catching them at a good age. Now, what I would do is I would probably, if you have any sort of budget from the group that's brought you in, spend $10 or $20, and by that I mean Australian dollars. See how I localized my answer, Brad?
I see how you did that.
I would spend $10 or $20 and photocopy like a basic sheet of some stuff so that you don't have to necessarily go over it, but you can quickly say like, hey, here's 5 steps on doing a comic: lettering first, paneling, character design, and then character inking, that kind of thing. Basically, a couple, like, if you can find a way to summarize Scott McCloud's Making Comics into a 1 or 2 page flyer that you can give to the kids, that's great, right?
Yeah.
So that's step 1. Step 2 is to, I think, always recognize, and my wife gave me this advice for teaching, always recognize that you're teaching the whole group, but maybe there's only 1, 2, 3 of them in that whole 30 group that are going to super internalize what you say.
Right.
So you have to give everybody the chance and the hope that they're all going to be the one to internalize it, but also the awareness that maybe really only 2 or 3, but for those 2 or 3, you might be the life-changing cartoonist that caught them at the right moment.
Yeah.
Right, Brad? And so for those, you've really got to up your game. But as far as the planning, really, it's just an advanced version of what you taught little kids. And so I think some of your lessons basically just age it up and you'll be fine. Brad, you go ahead, because you've done more teaching than I have, and I'd be curious what you said.
Well, first of all, I would say don't get too don't make this into more than it is. And what I mean by that is, what do you got? Like a couple of hours that you're going to have with these young folks.
Oh, true.
You're not going to get that much done. Right. In other words, if you're looking for,
you're not going to have that one kid at the end of the 2 hours going, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Right.
You're going to really, here's what your goal should be. Number one, share your love of comics with some people who might be looking for a kindred spirit. Number two, spend a little time, nothing else. And if you get into a little bit of stuff, like you're going to probably give them the broad strokes of basic comics. In other words, any one of us, if we've ever taken somebody aside and talked comics technique, we share this tip with them. Do the lettering first, then draw your word balloon around the lettering. Right? Because if you do the word balloon first, like everybody does in the third grade, you end up running out of room, and the last line kind of crawls around the bottom curve of the word balloon. So do the lettering first, and then draw the balloon around the lettering. The basic type stuff here. We use blue pencils because they don't photocopy. All of that kind of stuff, and then set them loose, drawing their own comics. And then I would walk around and kind of spend some time with some of the ones who seem to be taking it seriously, giving them a little one-on-one time and giving them some advice that's fine-tuned to where they are in their process. And other than that, your job there is to just share your joy of comics with some young people and give it. I would say that you've got two goals: to share your joy and make yourself available if one of those people want to reach out to you in an email later and say, "Oh, I'd like to get some more information. I've got a question about posting out of Webtoons," or something like that. You can be a mentor to that person going on. And this class is just a way to establish that initial connection and say, okay, here's how you can get in touch if you want some more information. But I would not try to do any more than that. Because let's face it, you're not going to be able to accomplish it.
Yeah, I do want to go back to my flyer idea, because I don't know why I'm thinking this is a great idea. Because if Brad's right, and I think he is, that you want to share your love of cartooning, you want to say, like, look, I'm an adult and I'm making this happen and it's delightful, then it lets a kid know that you're modeling a life that they might be like, oh, I would like to do that, right? So that's part one. Part two is, to Brad saying, you're making yourself and broader information available. So what I would do is, on that flyer that I had mentioned before, on the back of it, I would say, because you can't assume that teens know this, I would give them 4 titles that they can follow up with, like Scott McCloud, Understanding Comics, DC Comics, Making Comics the DC Way, Marvel Comics, Making Comics the Marvel Way, a really good whatever book you'd want to do on penciling or inking or anything like that. And a couple of good follow-ups would be like for the 1 or 2 or 3 kids in that class that got the bug, or that already had the bug going in, but no one in their life is an artist. You're giving them 5 resources they can walk out the door with and check out from their library for free. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. Give them access to resources and make yourself available potentially as a mentor. But other than that's the most you can expect out of that time. You can't expect more of yourself.
Yeah, and the one I was thinking of the wrong title. Carl Potts did POTTS did the DC Comics Guide to Creating Comics, and that one's good. Yeah, and then obviously Scott McCloud with Making Comics.
And then there's lots of books out there on like humor cartooning and stuff like that. Yeah. And there's a few that you can point them to there. But yeah, I that's actually, Dave, the idea of pointing them towards books is a really good idea, because that was my experience. I was always like, oh, where can I find more information about this? And of course, Amazon didn't exist back then. But now you're given a plethora of options, and now you're saying, which is the good one?
Yeah. And also, I think books were great for me because the one time in high school where I was like, oh, wow, the community college in summer is offering a cartooning class. And I went, Brad, and granted, this is very specific and very unique to that class probably. I found it sort of sad. It was like a bunch of people are like, how do I make a circle? And you're like, oh, Lord, I'm a little bit mentally past this. Could we go a little faster? And so for me, I'm just saying that I responded better to books because I could jump pages to what I was ready to tackle. You know what I mean? Whereas in a community class or in something like that, I found it a little frustrating because it moved slower and at a lower pace than I was ready for. So, but anyway, Cameron, I think to Brad's point, share your joy, share resources, and give them follow-ups that they can tackle, and I think you'll be good to go. Don't you think, Brad? I think that puts a button on that one.
I think that's great advice, Dave.
All right, so let me ask you one now, my friend.
Okay.
And this one, it's kind of fun, so I want to do this one next.
Yeah.
All right, so this one comes in from Jeremy Sipe, and he says, Dave and Brad, every time I see a video or a photo of either of your workplaces, I hurt my eyes. Now, hold on, Jeremy.
Wait a minute. It hurts his eyes to see?
Apparently to see a photo of us, Brad, I guess. Now, listen, I know that I have a face only a mother could love, but this cuts deep, Jeremy.
Jeremy, I only half agree with you.
I see what you did, Brad Geiger. Brad Geiger, very clever. All right. So listen.
But there's more to his question?
There's more. Okay. Yeah, it's not just, hey, Dave and Brad, you're real ugly. That's my question for the week. Every time I see a video or a photo of either of your workplaces, I hurt my eyes trying to read the titles of books on bookcases. Oh, it's about the books. Okay. You both have obviously spent time building a collection of meaningful works. Brad's recent webcomic Confidential are particularly painful in their curated, but you can't see it, neener style. I would love a list or a good shelf photo of works that particularly meaningful to you, be it for writing, artistic skill, or an amazing how-to on whatever topic. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, Brad, this is an interesting question. How do we answer orally what he's asked for visually on the podcast? How do we share our book collections?
Here's an idea. And number one, I'm more than happy to post like a high-res photograph of my bookcase so you can see every last title that I've got, and we can put that up with the Patreon post. But I'm gonna rephrase his question to give it a little focus. Dave, take a look at your bookcase.
Yeah, looking at it right now.
You're moving to the moon, and you can only take 3 of those books with you. Which you're going to have to put the rest of them in storage or give them away. You can only keep 3. Which 3 do you keep?
Oh, Brad, that's an impossible question. You've seen my book collection.
Your book collection is impressive.
You're a jerk. All right, so I'm down to 3. All right, here's what. Okay, close your eyes. Here's what I'm going to pick.
Okay.
All right, Evil Inc. Volume 6, Evil Inc. Volume 7, Evil Inc. Volume 8.
Good choices all. You know what? The funny thing is, you want to hear what my choices are?
Sure.
Evil Inc. Volume 7, Evil Inc. Volume 8, and Volume 9.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's here all week. Don't forget your waitress. Have a good night. Drive safe. So I'm actively looking at my shelf as we talk, Brad, and I legit okay, here's one thing. This is a bit of a cheat.
Yeah.
I would keep my Calvin and Hobbes box set.
Yeah,
that's one I would keep.
Do that. Yeah.
I would keep my Far Side box set, and I would probably keep a book called The Art of Richard Thompson that was put together by 4 or 5 folks that I think is beautiful. But that's just a quick guess.
Your books are all inspiration.
Yeah, well, and enjoyment. I have a lot of books on this shelf that I don't actually enjoy. And I'll give you an example.
Evil Inc. Volume 6, Evil Inc. Volume 7, and Evil Inc. Volume 8.
No, I mean, I have a lot of books on my shelf. One, because I like to see the variety of how books are bound and presented. Because every time, like, for example, Beth and I are putting together the next book, and we pull out 40 or 50 copies of similarly bound, similarly presented books to see what they did or how they did certain things, right? Mm-hmm, it's like finding best practices. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, basically, right? So I keep a bunch of books and I buy a bunch of books for that reason. But then there's also books that I bought for historical reasons that I don't actually enjoy all that much. Like I have 4 or 5 or 6 Pogo books.
Right.
But the truth is I actually don't enjoy Pogo all that much, even though the art is really unique. But every once in a while I'll be like, I will want to reference like, how did Walt Kelly do this? How did Walt Kelly do that? And I'll pull a Walt Pogo book off the shelf, right? Mm-hmm. Or there's a British cartoonist who was big in the 60s, 70s, 80s named Giles, Giles. And I picked up like 6 of those books when I lived in England. I don't really love them, but they're just really uniquely drawn and really uniquely presented. And he has a very specific humor style. And sometimes it's just helpful for me in my writing to step out of my brain into somebody else's writing because it jars certain ideas.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I'm getting at is a lot of my collection is just like, here are other things that are possible in comics. And maybe 20% of here are things that Dave actually enjoys. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. I totally get that. But it's interesting that all three of your books are also like comic strip or comic panel books. Because Richard Thompson, he did Cul-de-sac, right? The syndicated.
Well, listen,
strip?
if we were gonna expand it to like best ofs that I would read, the thing is I don't read comics that much. That's my dirty little secret.
Yeah, I know.
But if I had to reread certain things, it would probably be Saga to date. I would want to reread that. That's good.
Do you want to reread it badly enough to make it one of your three?
No, but if we could pick like 10 to 20.
You're breaking the rules. You
I
can't
know,
have 10 to 20. You're
anyway,
going to the moon. These are heavy books.
Well, I know. Well, listen, we've talked enough about me. Let's hear Brad's big three. What are the big three on your shelf?
The one that I don't even have to think about is my copy of How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, just because it always... I can never pick it up and not be transported to that 12-year-old that I was when I got it for Christmas. And also,
isn't that funny? That never clicked with me, but I'm very glad that it did for you.
Yeah, it really did. And I was lucky enough to get it signed by both authors. And just those signatures take me back to meeting those guys. And that book in a lot of different ways and on a lot of different levels just makes me happy. Just that I have it. And it's funny because I think a lot of the books that I'm going to keep are more like how-to books, just because there's such a passion about talking about the technique and the reasoning and the philosophy of comics. I've got a book called The Complete Book of Cartooning by, I think his name is Richard Adkins. It's very dated. It was very big in the 70s, and it hasn't gotten a second edition that I know of. But it's another one of those books that it talks about everything from single panel to strips to comic books and political cartoons. And again, and process is where I learned about CMYK printing for the first time, even though I couldn't get my head around it. There's so much, just flipping through that book reminds me of the joy I feel in cartooning. So that might have to be another one. I don't want to say the Calvin and Hobbes box set because you've already trod that ground.
You can say it. But here's the thing, though, Brad. Here's the honest to God truth, and I would never say this to Bill, but I don't even know that I've read that in 10 or 15 years, right?
Or paged through it. It's just nice to know that you got it.
It's just nice to know that I have it, but again, this goes back to I don't actually read comics all that often. Sorry, not to interrupt you. Sorry, keep going. So you're not going to pick Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, I might not pick Calvin and Hobbes. It might come down to a coin flip between the Calvin and Hobbes book and the Harvey Kurtzman book that compiled all. It was a big coffee table book of Harvey Kurtzman's work that included all of his stuff. I mean, think about it. The guy launched Mad Magazine and then had a career that spanned all of that kind of stuff over to the Little Annie Fanny stuff for Playboy. Playboy magazine. He had basically a half-page sequential comic that ran every month in a magazine. That was really astounding. It was His stuff is just gorgeous, and he was really a cartoonist's cartoonist. And he had such a great variety and such a just a laudable style to his line. You know what? Kurtzman just might knock Calvin and Hobbes off the ledge. I think I would take that one. It's just because I can just linger over his drawings, over his line work for hours. So yeah, if I'm taking one inspiration, it might just be that Art of Harvey Kurtzman book. And then 2 how-to books that just more for sentimental value is because I'm transported being back to that youngster again every time I flip through those pages.
Yeah, it's funny because I have one sentimental one that I didn't mention, and it's a collection, and you won't find it anywhere in the States. It's a white book that just says Low, Low, and it's the art of David Low, who I've talked about before, who's a Australian British cartoonist, and beautiful artwork. I go back to it every 5 to 10 years to just page through it because it's really beautiful brushwork. That's a sentimental one for me from my time in England.
Yeah.
But it's funny how, like you, Brad, I have I'm glancing at my shelf, maybe 10 or 15 300, 400 page books that are like the encompassing histories of comics. It's like,
yep. Oh, I've got a bunch
Children
of
of the
those.
Yellow, 100 Years of American Comics, Children of the Yellow Kid, Cartooning for Everyone, the comics, and that's from the 60s. The New Yorker, huge collection of New Yorker comics, the Great American Comic Strip. Like I have like 20 of these books, and they're all kind of versions of each other, separated out by 10 years. Like this one's from 1940, this one's from 1950, this one's from 1960. But I guess part of why I have this collection too is that I just love comics, and I love books about comics, and it's a physical expression of a love for an art form, even if I don't read them that much. But also, I would like to, when I pass, and this is something I don't know that you and I have ever talked about, I would like to donate this collection of books to Ohio State. And sure, some of them will be duplicates of stuff they have, but I know for a fact that I've got some books on this shelf that very few people in the world have from World War I or World War II, and I would love for them to go to a nice big repository for comics.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny you mentioned that because so this past week, my younger son is in Poland traveling with the Keystone State Boy Choir, and so we've got the older son home, and he's like, "Hey, we can do some stuff if you want. We can go on a road trip." And we're like, okay, great. We've been wanting to go back down to Baltimore because there's a place down there called LP Steamers. I think it's Locust Point Steamers. It's a crab house that we discovered.
Thank God it's a restaurant. I wasn't sure what you were about to say.
Yeah, well, they've got pipe problems too. No, I'm kidding. It's a great crab house down in Baltimore. And I'm like, let's take a road trip down to Baltimore and get crabs. And we decided he's what? What?
Many a sailor has said that phrase. Hey, let's go down to Baltimore and get crabs.
I didn't even realize I'd said that. So we decide, since he's 17, he's starting to get into that age where he's thinking about colleges and stuff. So we'll combine a college trip as we're down there. So we go down and visit Goucher College, or Goucher University rather, in Towson, Maryland, just north, I think, of Baltimore. Anyway, or south. It's one of the directions. And we're going around. We got there early, so we're just walking around campus. We walk into the library. Remember how we were telling people you never want to put a date on the title of your book, like, Evil Ink 2009? Oh, yeah. I found the comics instruction section, and I find best cartoons of the year 1970.
Ooh, that's a page turner.
Oh, my God. You know what I realized? Not only did you not have to know how to draw in 1970, it was actively frowned upon. I mean, when you page through that book, one page after another of like lower than a doodle, it looked like half of these had been drawn blindfolded and at gunpoint.
Also, like every topic is like, will the U.S. come off the gold standard? What will President Nixon do? You're like, who cares anymore? Why did they make this a book?
They weren't political cartoons. I mean, there was a political section.
Sorry. Okay.
I know the book you're thinking about. This is a different series. It was like magazine gag cartoons and cartoons from the New Yorker and stuff like this.
You know what? I can see that as a big Christmas gift, though. That I could see why that. But why put a date on it, though?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, clearly it was dated, but it just really struck me visually how there was a real style in the late 60s and the early 70s that was absolutely against drawing well. I mean, you really, to my eye, it looks sloppy. It looks haphazard. But there's a real look to those early 70s cartoons that is unescapable.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's when early versions of the Sharpie were invented. And
Yeah.
so as a cartoon historian, I've looked at a lot of originals. They're all faded, by the way.
Yeah.
But that age was very representative of like, now we can draw with markers, hooray! And the style all kind of went, like
Yeah.
everybody's style kind of went like, well, we're drawing with markers now, to hell with having anything that looks good.
Yeah, it was and in the newspaper pages, it was Wizard of Id and those Brant Parker and Johnny Hart comics. Where you draw an arm and then just do a series of loops at the end, and now you got fingers, and it's now you got to stop drawing the arm, and it's just like, holy crap! They didn't put any. I don't want to say they didn't put any thought into it, because it had its own aesthetic. It's an aesthetic that I don't have an appreciation for, but it's got its own aesthetic. But boy, oh boy, is it ever free and loose.
What's the dude that did the long rambling comics in the Village Voice in the 60s and 70s?
Jules Feiffer.
Jules Feiffer, yes.
Yeah.
To me, he is emblematic of that age of cartooning where it's just like, I drew this with my toes, hooray!
Yeah, now back to smoking banana peels.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that I've denigrated Mr. Pfeiffer, who I think is still with us.
Who had a career, by the way, that was 40 times bigger than we'll ever have, but that's fine.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's always nice to make fun of your betters, I suppose.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on to our last question for the show, Brad. You want to read it to me, or shall I read it to you?
I want to read it to you because it's about you.
Oh, okay.
It's a trip down memory lane. This comes from Mark Ashworth, who says, I remember that Sheldon was on Keenspot. Sheldon is obviously your humor comic strip.
Right.
Sheldon was on Keenspot, noticed it wasn't anymore, then did some quick research. According to Wikipedia, that same strip has been either on or with djk3.ac.uk, davekellett.com.
Oh, yeah, my old master's degree website. That's right. Yeah.
As well as davekellett.com, Keenspot, United Features Syndicate, which is a great story in and of itself.
Oh boy,
Blank Label Comics, Blank Label Comics, Sheldon Comics, and Half Pixel. From your 20 years of hopping from one venue to another, you venue hopping fool you, would you share any insights on how you decide when to change and where to go?
Sure. So here's my broad pick. First of all, that's fun to hear all those because holy shit, that was a lot of different sites over the years. So my first website where Sheldon appeared was in 1998, and I was doing my master's program in England and wanted to share it with friends back home while I was submitting to syndicates, and that's the one that I made on Microsoft Word, Brad. And
oh my God.
Posted to my student account in the UK, and boy, what a crappy site it was. Anyway, so here's my metaphor that I want you to think of as to why I switched lanes so many times. I know in my career that I got to get from Los Angeles to New York, right?
Yep.
But that doesn't mean, even though I'm going down that road, that if a truck is moving slow in one lane, that I have to stay in that lane and follow the slow truck all the way to New York. If a lane to my right opens up and there's a way better opportunity, I am going to switch lanes. And frankly, if I can skirt both those lanes and get them both working for me, then all the better. And that was my philosophy with comics, Brad, is like, I am going to make a career in comics come hell or high water. And whatever is working at that time is one thing that I'm going to try. And I will add that to my repertoire. So while I had davekellett.com or sheldoncomics.com, you bet your bippy, I was also hosting it over on keenspot.com or United Feature Syndicate or Blank Label Comics or Half Pixel or even now over at Go Comics, just because it's reaching somebody out there that I couldn't reach on my own, right? And so the trick, as always, is to maintain a centralized website. In my case, for Sheldon, it's sheldoncomics.com, which has been active since I think like 2001, maybe 2000. And so whenever I can, I try to point traffic back to there. But I always have these ancillary satellite websites. And Brad, I think you have done the same, right? I mean, why don't take me through your last 15 to 20 years of comics?
Well, it was very similar to yours. In other words, I started on Keenspace. Well, I started on GeoCities, then went to Keenspace, then to Keenspot, and then a lot of the same jumps that you had: Blank Label Comics, Half Pixel, I waited. I didn't have it together enough to have my own website for quite a while, and then it was Evil-Comic, and then I finally got the rights to Evil-Inc. Through a domain. I was able to grab the domain. But the bigger issue here, I want to go back because actually it's the same point for both of us. But the question asker says you hopped sites. I know I just threw that in to make you happy. The question asker says you hopped sites. You never really hopped sites. You always had one central site, and then you also posted on other places in order to generate traffic and increase the breadth of your distribution online. But you never hopped sites.
Well,
it was always pretty much Sheldon.
Yes and no. Here's what happened, though. There's 2 times where I did absolutely hop sites, and it's worth taking you through this. I'm in the UK. I'm doing my master's degree. Oh, boy, look at me. I'm getting a master's in a subject that no one cares about. World War II cartooning. Okay, here we go. I'm going to post my comics on my student site, right? So I post my comics on my student website. But then you graduate, and they're like, all right, that server space is no longer yours. And so I had to hop onto davekellett.com then, right? And so that was the move there. So that was a complete move of the archives, quote unquote, which I think was like 35 comics, to a new site, right? And then in 2001, after submitting many a time to different syndicates, because God, I still wanted to be in a newspaper in 2001. United Feature Syndicate reached out and said, hey, we like your stuff. We'd like to trial run it for a while on the United Feature Syndicate website. And I said, oh boy, here's my chance. I'm going to make it in newspapers. And what I did was, in an effort to interest the editors, I rebooted Sheldon. And I don't know if you know this, Brad. No. I tossed like the first 600 Sheldons from 1998 to 2001 and started over. In fact, I think I haven't done it. Let's do it right now while I'm talking. But if you go to sheldoncomics.com, I think the first date of the first year is like 2000 or 2001, something like that, because it doesn't include the first 3 years that I did comics. Oh, sorry. It starts in, hold on one second. It starts in 2001. Yeah, November 2001. Because that's when I relaunched it for United Feature Syndicate, Brad, because by God, I was going to be in newspapers. And that worked out perfect. Anyway, after I relaunched it, and I don't remember how long it was, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, I was like, this is not going anywhere. And so I brought it back to sheldoncomics.com, and it's been there ever since. But those were the 2 big leaps that I made, both of which were just hoping to make something happen. And now I have since learned, and this is the advice that I would give to everyone else in the world, is always maintain one central place. Never give up your rights to first printing or first publication or the right to, at the very least, to host everything in your archive in that one spot. Because every other opportunity will come and go, as Brad and I can speak to over 20 years on the internet. But your one website you want to maintain for you.
That's exactly the point I was driving at. In other words, although I appreciate hearing about the places that you housed your comic before Sheldon Comics, I also am going to argue that's kind of prehistory. That Sheldon Comics really kind of started in 2001, that November, right? The Sheldon Comics that we know.
Sure.
But the bigger point there is what you just said. You always had a central website that you housed your stuff, you had control over. Nobody could come in and say, oh, we're, like Tumblr did recently, and say, oh, we're not going to have this one certain type of content anymore. And then you're just kind of standing there going, what happened to this thing I built, right? Now, that didn't mean that you didn't also have stuff on Half Pixel or Go Comics or Blank Label Comics, because you were going where you saw potential for building new audience.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you've also now got to include your Instagram page, your Twitter feed, your Facebook. Well, you don't do Facebook anymore, but your Reddit outreach. You've got to include all of those in exactly the same way that you would include Keen Spot and Blank Labels. All you're doing is putting your comics where people are liable to see them and where there are good audience building, audience retention possibilities. That's fine, but that's not site hopping. Your site was always the same. And you always had a central hub that you controlled. And I think that's a really important point to get across is that he didn't keep moving around. He always had one place. But what he did was he added this distribution for a while, and that was Blank Label Comics. Then he added this other distribution for a while. That was his Twitter page, and so on and so forth. And that's an important distinction to understand our approach to web publishing. Is that there was no hopping. It was always the one place, and then there was distribution through different means in an attempt to build a bigger audience.
And so to build on the last part of your question there which is any insights on when to jump into a new venue or when to try out a new medium or that kind of thing. I think both Brad and I will agree, and Instagram is a great example of this, where we see cartoonists innovating and finding success. You bet your bippy Brad and I are going to get on the phone and go, hey, are you going to try this? Yeah, I'm going to try this. All right, let's try this.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we jumped into Instagram. We saw a lot of friends within a year or two jumping up to 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 readers. And we're like, I can make some money. I don't know how yet, but I can make money if I've got 300,000 readers on Instagram. And I'll figure it out. Let's start today, and I'll figure it out as I go. And so to Alan's earlier question about like, hey, I'm not seeing any traction on it. So have I made any money from Instagram yet? Maybe. Well, I could argue that one or two people have shown up at Comic-Con because of Instagram, or maybe I've gotten a few more Patreon backers. Let's say tops, I've made $300, $400 from Instagram. But that's a long-term plan to start building up an audience in a new spot, because by God, I'm going to be a cartoonist and I'm going to make a career at this, right?
Right. And you listen, and you've got all kinds of opportunities out in front of you, most of which are free, all of which include a little bit of a time sink. Okay, your decisions on what you're going to spend time with and how you're going to spend time with it, those are all up to you.
Right.
And what works for one person might not work so well for you. But as we've said on this show countless times, there are many paths to the top of that mountain, and you've got to find the one that's right for you, that works best for the kind of stuff that you do. Just realize, like Dave said, all of this stuff that we're doing is the long game, is building things with consistent output. How many comics, including Drive and Sheldon, off the top of your head, if you counted them all, how many thousands of comics have you done since you started?
It's over 4,000. It might be over 4,500. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Same here, right? If you include stuff like Courtney Disaster and Fables, thousands and thousands over the course of a career that spans decades.
Oh, wait, I guess if I include Drive, I'm up to like 5,000 now.
But that's what I mean. This is something that you build one strip and one page at a time over the course of years and years and years. And it's not going to happen with just a couple of hundred strips in your archive, unless you're very, very special, and if you are, thank you so much. And remember me in your will. But, but the thing I guess I'm trying to get at is it's a long, long road. And there are no shortcuts that I know about, aside from being colossally lucky. There's no shortcuts. You're just going to have to do this over a long period of time with an awful lot of love for the craft, because that's what's going to keep you going through those times when you're not making money.
Right.
You've got to love doing this, because it's going to be a long time before you see results.
Right. And even for those people or like an imaginary cartoonist for whom lightning strikes, like let's say Patton Oswalt retweets you tomorrow, right? It doesn't do you any good if you don't have archives, if you don't have more to show people, and if it's not of quality similar to the one that got retweeted, right? So you've still got to have readiness and preparation ready to meet luck when it happens. So even if you're counting on luck, you've still got to prepare. You've still got to put in the work and the time. And so you're waiting on that day when, I don't know, Miley Cyrus is going to retweet you. All right, good for you. But in the meantime, keep working on that archive, keep building it up brick by brick, and get better and better at different aspects of your career.
I got news for you.
What's that?
This is the old magic wand talk that I give on webcomics.com. Most of us are always saying that. Oh, if I could only get, I'd say, what if I could wave a magic wand and I could bring 1 million visitors to your site tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Would you do it? And of course, everybody says, yes, of course, that's what I need. That's what I need to get more eyes on my comic. That's the only thing keeping me back is to get more eyes on my comic. And I'm like, here's the problem with that. You're not ready for 1 million visitors, and 1 million visitors today would be, I don't want to say wasted on you, but it would be wasted. Frankly, the same as it might be wasted on me right now, or might have been wasted on me 10 years ago.
Right.
And here's what I mean. That comic that's up today has got to be able to keep that 1 million visitors, that 1 million new visitors to your site. It's got to be either be able to entice them or to keep them completely. And like Dave rightly points out, you've got to have a deep archive so that once they are enticed, they've got a whole bunch of comics to read that are of equal or greater value. That's going to cement that fandom and turn that first-time visitor into a new fan or a potential Patreon backer, etc. If you don't have that on your site today, me waving that magic wand is going to be a waste, because they're all going to come, see something that they don't get, don't understand, couldn't care less about, and bounce. And they're not going to come back.
Right.
That's the magic wand. That's the magic wand talk. Most people would love to have you wave a magic wand and bring 1 million visitors to your site, but on the week after that, they would be right there where they were before I waved the magic wand.
Yep.
And your goal is to get to the point where if somebody actually does wave that magic wand in the real world, like a Patton Oswalt retweet or something like that, that you've prepared yourself and that site is ready to capture those 1 million people and turn them into fans. Not only the quality of the comic up today, but the things that you got up on your site. Is it easy for me to find out if you got ebooks for sale? Is it easy for me to see where your Patreon is? Is it easy for me to see what you got going on in the world? Is that website ready to capture and convert? Then you're ready for somebody to wave that magic wand. Until then, keep working on your craft. You'll get there. You got to do it the way Dave did it, and the way I did it, one day at a time.
Yep.
And the way we're still, if I say did it as if we've accomplished something, I can talk for Dave just as easily as I can talk for myself. Neither one of us considers ourselves there yet.
No,
we're much better than we were 10 years ago. I can make an image I'm very much more proud of than I was before. But do you think I'm there yet? No, I've still got places I need to go. I still got improvement I got to make. I still have things I've got to improve. We're in no way, shape, or form do either one of us try to put ourselves up as examples of somebody who have achieved it. In fact, we talked about the arrival fallacy last week. But we're right there along with you, walking that road, trying to get better.
Yeah, like we're probably going to feel like we've made it about 3 days after we died. Like, oh, dang it. Well, I finally made it. Oh, well.
Yeah, that last heart rate monitor is going to be going beep, 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 beep.
Hey, your books just went viral. Oh, no, Grandpa. Oh, he went too soon. Yeah, exactly.
And on that sobering note, you've been listening to a newly flatlined Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
And your hosts have been the always lively Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com, and get your pens out, the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And the not dead yet Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from the very lively Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the always alive and kicking Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we're going to say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
Grandpa, can you still hear me?
Beep, 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 beep. Yes,
Grandpa, your book.
I can hear you.
We're so close. It's about to break through on the New York Times bestseller.
Yes. I'm so happy to hear this.
Beep! We did it, Grandpa!
Wait, I'm back.
Yeah, that would bring Brad Geiger back from the grave.
Yeah, that'd be like, okay, I'm ready for part 2.
You're like already crafting a press release. Brad Geiger today was the New York Times. Like,
oh no, better yet, I go. So the kid is about to make the announcement.
Okay.
So I'm lying in bed, and the kid is saying, "You're just about at the
Grandpa,
New York Times.
You're almost at the New York Times bestseller list.
Beep 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 beep.
Grandpa, it's so close.
Thank goodness. Beep 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 beep.
You did it, Grandpa. You did it.
Beep beep. Beep, 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 beep. Works every time.
Don't tell him that he's actually on Remainder on Amazon. Beep.